Two lives are just gone in a heartbeat. A whole family legacy is lying in pieces on the side of the road. And honestly, the world of Los Angeles high fashion is never going to look the same after this. You have to wonder, was this really just a terrible twist of fate? Or are we actually watching the moment the Forrester and Spencer dynasties finally start to crumble under their own weight? Welcome back, and today we're really getting into the messy, painful reality of what people are calling the biggest tragedy to ever hit the bold and the beautiful. This isn't just another plot twist for a sweeps week. It's a total emotional reset that has left the biggest characters in the show completely leveled. When you see someone like Bill Spencer or Rich Forrester, guys who usually act like they own the sun, just fall apart in tears, you know the game has changed forever. But before we look at the wreckage, I've got to ask you something that's been bugging me. Do you really believe this was just a normal accident, or was there something much darker happening on that highway? Think about how this whole thing started. It was just a regular morning in LA, the kind of day where you'd expect to see people grabbing lattes and heading to board meetings. But then, the sun came up over the Pacific Coast Highway, and instead of a beautiful commute, everything turned into a literal nightmare. We're talking about a massive pileup with twisted metal and broken glass everywhere, and the sound of sirens was so loud it felt unreal. It's such a jarring contrast to the usual glamour we see at Forrester Creations. In my opinion, the writers chose the PCH for a reason. It's a road that represents freedom and wealth, but it turned into a graveyard in seconds, showing that no amount of money can buy you a way out of a tragedy. Why did this hit so hard? Because for the first time, these powerful families couldn't talk their way out of a problem. The news hit Forrester and Spencer publications like a physical blow, and suddenly, all those high-stakes business deals didn't matter anymore. Everyone just stopped mid-sentence, their phones shaking in their hands as the silence in the room became almost impossible to breathe through. It's that heavy, suffocating silence that happens when you realize your world has just been cut in half. Let's talk about Bill Spencer for a second, because his reaction was honestly one of the most shocking parts of this whole thing. This is a man who calls himself Dollar Bill, and usually thinks he can control everything with a checkbook or a threat. He was just standing there in his office when the call came in, with the morning light hitting those big windows and his coffee sitting there getting cold. It's such a small detail, the cold coffee, but it really shows how life just stops when bad news hits. You could tell that phone felt like it weighed 100 pounds as he listened to the news. For a guy who has spent his whole life being one step ahead of everyone, being told that someone he loves is gone is like a total system failure. Psychologically, Bill is someone who uses power as a shield, but in that moment, the shield was gone, and he was just a man hearing something he couldn't change. To me, his grief felt so heavy because it was the first time we've seen him truly helpless. When he finally got to the hospital and the tears started coming, he didn't even try to hide them, which is just wild if you know how much he prides himself on being the Iron Man of LA. Is he finally growing a soul? Or is there something else eating him alive? Then you have Brooke Logan, and her reaction was just so physical it was hard to watch. The second she heard the news, it was like the floor just disappeared from under her feet. She had to grab the edge of her desk just to stay standing because her knees were literally giving out. You know that feeling when the world goes blurry and everything sounds like it's underwater? That's exactly what happened to her as the office noise faded out and her brain just got flooded with memories of laughter and fights and all those deep connections. It's like a grief wave that just crashes over you all at once. I think it's really interesting that she was immediately drawn to Bill at the hospital. Even though they have such a messy, complicated history, the tragedy just wiped all of that away for a minute. She reached out and put her hand on his arm, and it was such a simple move, but it said everything. It made me wonder, was she trying to comfort him, or was she just holding on to him so she wouldn't fall over herself? It feels like this tragedy has reset their whole dynamic, stripping away the drama and leaving just two people trying to survive a nightmare. Over at the Cliff House, things were even more intense. Steffi's world didn't just crack, it completely shattered the second that phone call ended. The scream that came out of her was so raw and piercing it probably echoed through the whole house. She didn't even try to act like the tough CEO we usually see. She just collapsed into Finn's arms, shaking uncontrollably. It was pure, unfiltered grief, and it really shows you that deep down, Steffi is still carrying a lot of trauma from her past. Seeing her like that, totally broken, makes you realize that her warrior persona is really just a mask she wears to feel safe. At the hospital, she was clinging to her family so tightly, like she was terrified that if she let go for even a second, someone else would just vanish into thin air. Her cries were so sharp and painful that nobody could ignore them, and it really makes you feel for her. I honestly think this is going to change Steffi forever. She's going to be looking over her shoulder from now on, waiting for the next disaster to strike. And we can't forget about Ridge. Ridge is the ultimate fixer. He's the guy who thinks he can solve any crisis with a new dress design or a big speech. But this time, his usual confidence was just gone. He looked completely different, almost hollow, with no color in his face and his eyes looking like he was a million miles away. It was like his brain was just refusing to accept what was happening. You could actually see the moment it clicked for him that this was a problem he couldn't fix, and that realization seemed to drain the life right out of him. Psychologically, Ridge's whole identity is built on being the protector of the Forrester family, so this accident is like a direct hit to his ego. At the hospital, he couldn't even stand still. He was pacing back and forth, and you could tell his mind was just racing, trying to find something solid to hold onto in the middle of all the chaos. I'm telling you, Ridge is a ticking time bomb right now. When a man like him feels this helpless, he's going to look for someone to blame, and that usually doesn't end well for anyone. The hospital itself was just a cold, miserable place to be that day. You've got that sharp smell of antiseptic and the hum of the lights, which just makes everything feel even more clinical and final. Nobody was talking at first because what do you even say when your world has been blown up? Words just felt useless, maybe even a little disrespectful, considering what they were all facing. Instead, they just grabbed each other's hands and held on for dear life. It was a really strange sight to see Bill Spencer standing there with them, not as the big boss, but as a man whose posture had just collapsed under the weight of his own grief. It was honestly shocking to see him that vulnerable, especially since he's the guy who usually hides every bit of weakness. Even Brooke, who has plenty of reasons to stay away from him, couldn't help but step closer to him because he looked so human in his pain. It's like the tragedy created this weird, temporary peace between everyone, but you have to wonder how long that can actually last. When the doctors finally came out to confirm everything, it felt like a final blow that just knocked the wind out of everyone. The way they say it is always so detached and clinical, which only makes the reality feel more devastating. There was no more maybe or what if, it was just over. As the hours dragged on, that initial shock started to turn into something much deeper and darker. People started asking the questions that no one wants to answer. How did this happen? Could it have been stopped? But the truth is, even if they had the answers, it wouldn't bring anyone back. Outside the hospital, the rest of LA was just carrying on like nothing happened, which is such a weird, lonely feeling when your own life has stopped cold. Brooke was just staring out the window at her own reflection, probably thinking about all the things she wished she'd said or done differently. That's the guilt phase of grief, and it's something that can really eat a person alive if they don't find a way through it. Speaking of guilt, did you notice how Bill just pulled away from everyone at one point? He went and sat by himself with his head in his hands, and you could just see this massive weight of something deeper settling onto him. The source mentions it felt like guilt, which is really interesting. I mean, why would Bill Spencer feel guilty about a car accident? Unless, of course, he knows something we don't. Maybe he said something to one of the victims before they left, or maybe he's hiding a secret about what led up to that pileup on the PCH. Bill's silence is always a red flag for me. When he stops talking and starts brooding, it usually means he's trying to bury something. He might be trying to find something to blame just to make the chaos make sense, but it feels like his own conscience is starting to press down on him. If Bill is hiding something, it's only a matter of time before it starts to leak out. Back at the Forrester offices, the atmosphere was just haunting. Those halls are usually so busy with people running around and models doing fittings, but now it's just quiet and heavy. Every little thing has become a reminder of what they've lost. Brooke will be walking through a room and just stop because a memory hits her so hard it makes her chest tighten. Ridge is trying to get back to work, but he can't even draw a straight line because his hands won't stop shaking and his sketches are just a blur. It's a perfect visual of how their lives are totally out of focus right now. Even Bill has lost that sharp, decisive energy that everyone is used to. That silence of his is speaking louder than anything he could actually say, and it's making everyone around him a little bit nervous. You can tell that the normal they're trying to get back to is just gone forever. The memorial service was where everything really came to the surface. The air was so thick with emotion you could practically feel it, and the only sounds were soft sobbing and people's voices shaking as they tried to speak. Steffi was the one who really got to everyone. She was visibly shaking as she stood up there, her voice cracking with every word. You could hear the love and the pain and the total disbelief in her voice, and it was just heartbreaking. Ridge was right there behind her, trying to be her rock, but even his own strength looked pretty fragile at that point. Brooke was just watching with red eyes, letting the tears fall freely as she took it all in. As they said their final goodbyes, it felt like something shifted between all of them. They seemed to reach this quiet understanding that life was never going to be the same, and in that shared grief, they actually found a tiny bit of connection. But the real question is that connection strong enough to survive what's coming next? In my opinion, this tragedy is about more than just loss, it's about a total transformation. These kinds of moments change who people are at their core. They force you to look at your priorities and they rip down all those walls you've spent years building up. For the Forresters and the Spencers, the impact of this is going to go way beyond just being sad. We're already seeing their dynamics change. Those walls are coming down, sure, but that means all the pressure and unresolved tension is starting to build up underneath. When you mix that kind of deep grief with old secrets and tensions, the result is almost always going to be unpredictable. This could either bring them all together for good, or it could be the thing that finally pushes them farther apart than ever before. And let's be real, this kind of pain doesn't just go away. It stays with you, and it starts making you ask questions that can be really dangerous. Here's what I really think is going to happen. Those questions are going to start tearing open truths that were never supposed to see the light of day. I have a feeling that what we're seeing right now is just the beginning of the emotional cracks that are going to split these families apart when they're at their weakest. Think about it. When people like Bill and Ridge get pushed this far, they don't just sit around and mourn forever. They react. And their reactions are usually pretty extreme. What happens when the guilt that Bill is feeling starts turning into blame? Or when the love they're all feeling right now turns into a toxic need for control or even resentment? It's a scary thought, but it's exactly the kind of drama that these families are built on. Are they really leaning on each other because they care? Or are they just holding on because they're terrified of what happens if they fall alone? Sometimes a tragedy doesn't actually unite people for the long haul. Sometimes it just delays the inevitable storm. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we start seeing some of those hidden tensions bubble up to the surface very soon. Imagine if someone starts digging into the details of the accident and finds something that just doesn't add up. If it turns out that this wasn't just a random pileup on the PCH, then this story stops being about loss and starts being about the truth and the massive price someone is going to have to pay for it. We've seen Bill Spencer do some pretty shady things in the past to protect himself or the people he loves. Could he be involved in a cover-up? Or could Ridge's need to fix things lead him to do something he can't take back? The possibilities are endless, and none of them look particularly good for the future of these families. The real impact of this loss is only just starting to be felt, and I think we're in for a very long, very painful road ahead. Every decision Brooke, Bill, and Ridge make from here on out is going to be colored by what happened that morning on the highway. It's changed their DNA as a family. So, now I really want to hear from you guys. Do you think this tragedy is actually going to bring them all together for good? Or do you think it's just setting the stage for a massive betrayal that's going to make the accident look like small potatoes? And if some really dark secrets do come out about what happened on the PCH, who do you think is going to be strong enough to handle it? And who do you think is just going to break completely? Drop your theories in the comments, because I know you guys have some thoughts on this. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Forrester tragedy, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming B&B commentary. We're going to be right here following every twist and turn of this story as the real secrets finally start to come out. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned, because things are about to get even more intense. It's so weird how life just keeps moving outside the hospital while everything inside is totally frozen. You've got people driving their cars and walking down the street like it's just another Tuesday, but for the Forresters, time has basically stopped. When the doctors finally came out and gave that clinical, detached confirmation, it was like the last bit of air left the room. There was no more hope to grab onto. Just that heavy, permanent finality. You have to wonder if that's why Bill started pulling away from everyone. Seeing him sitting there alone with his head in his hands makes you realize that his pain isn't just about the loss. It's about that deeper guilt that's starting to press down on him. The way the once busy halls of Forrester Creations have gone quiet is just eerie. Brooke finds herself pausing in those familiar places where she can almost hear the laughter of the people they lost, and her chest just tightens up. Even Ridge, who usually thrives on the chaos of the fashion world, can't find his footing anymore. He tries to focus on his work, but his sketches are just a blur because his hands won't stop shaking. It's a perfect visual of how their whole reality has been thrown out of focus. Even at the memorial, where they supposedly found that fragile connection, you could see how thin the ice really is. Ridge stood behind Steffi, trying to be her rock, but you could tell his own strength was looking incredibly fragile. The thing is, grief like this doesn't stay quiet for long. It starts asking questions that nobody is ready to answer. How did this happen? Could it have been prevented? These families are at their weakest right now, and that's exactly when the emotional cracks start to split everything apart. We're watching a total transformation happen in real time. The dynamics are already shifting, and even though walls are coming down, the pressure is just building up underneath. Are they really leaning on each other because they've changed, or are they just holding on because they're terrified of falling alone? I have a feeling that very soon, someone is going to start digging into the details of that multi-car accident on the PCH. And if they find one little thing that doesn't quite add up, this story is going to turn into a total war. If Bill's guilt turns into blame, or if Ridge's need for control takes over, the fallout will be massive. This isn't just a tragedy anymore. It's a countdown to the truth and the price of uncovering it. So, what do you think? Is Bill's silence a sign that he knows more than he's letting on? And who do you think is going to be the first one to break when the secrets finally start leaking out? Let me know your best theories in the comments. If you're as hooked on this tragedy as I am, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our deep dives into the fallout. We're going to be right here to cover every twist and turn of this shattered legacy. Thanks for hanging out with me today.